42 now.
We met years ago when
Lead that plays to our favorite.
I'm sorry, there are lines I just can't. I'm sorry, there are lines I just can't. I'm sorry, there are lines I just can't.
Steve brought me the idea to do this eyewitness program about 6 months ago, and he has put his heart and his soul and his passion into this like few people I've ever met. And the people that have come here today, it's an honor to Steve, and I thank you, Steve. You're a gentleman and an absolute pleasure. Some of the people that are here are thanks to Terry Crowfoot and John Severino, Joel Tater, who you all know is my partner in crime in this organization. Bill Dawson is technical, he's right here. Andrew is shooting the B-roll in the back. My son David, who provides technical help, is right there. My wife Barbara is here, not on the slide, but raise your hand, sweetie. Ross Keston shoots some of the stills. Ross, you all know Ross. There he is. Gary Sunken and Professor John Beaupre of Cal State LA, sorry, John, are in the back. They're doing tickets. They're the folks you met when you came in out of the rain. And finally, Robert, are you in the room? Chef Robert? No, okay. I want to thank Chef Robert, Vito, Charlie, and the staff of Victorio's here. They provide great food. They provide the atmosphere that we're all in, and I thank them all very, very much. We need to take a serious moment before we go further into the program. Most of you will know that we lost Harvey Ciders fairly recently. And even if you weren't at Channel 7, you know the reputation of Harvey Ciders as an award-winning, fine gentleman who was a superb person at his craft of television news. I'd like to get Irv Cuevas. Irv? Irv's going to give us a little bit of memories of Harvey. And after that, we'll move on with the rest of the program. Irv, good to see you.
Thank you, Bob. So memorable. Thanks to everyone for coming. Harvey was one of the first Eyewitness News writers. He retired in 1995, nearly 89 years old when he died last November. Harvey was known for his sense of humor, as most of you knew, and I think on his license plate it said Mr. Pun, so he was known for his puns. He was thought to be the inspiration for the wisecracking Murray character. Remember him on the Mary Tyler Moore Show? The producers had visited our newsroom to get some ideas. They looked at Harvey and said, oh, he'd make a good Murray. He was also an accomplished jazz writer and composer. Harvey won 2 local Emmys in the 70s, one of them with reporter Henry Alfaro, a younger Harvey. Harvey and his wife were married in 1975. Her hand is over his mouth in this photo. because he had just announced to everyone at the wedding he wasn't wearing any underwear. Kay says that's part of what she loved about Harvey. Kay sent this message. Harvey left the newsroom on his last day very reluctantly, even though he knew retirement was best for him. He enjoyed being there at Eyewitness News with his friends and sometimes exciting work. He enjoyed telling me things that happened, the jokes that were told. He lived a full and productive life while in LA. After he moved to the Pacific Northwest, he made many friends with the musicians as he wrote for a number of musical publications. He was a delightful man, and we enjoyed our marriage very much. And finally, Kay tells us that Harvey would have loved being here with us today, and for sure, that is a beautiful photo of Harvey. One quick thing, a lot of you know, especially the anchors, Harvey was the default kicker writer. You know, the last story in the show, those silly little inane, innocuous, superfluous stories about animals, babies. Remember the water skiing dog, I think from San Diego? Harvey could look at video and just encapsulate what that video said and then put together a short script and would end with one of his funny comments or one of his puns. And most of the time when it came back to the talent on camera, they would be chuckling or guffawing with what Harvey did with his kickers. So we remember Harvey fondly. Thank you.
As I mentioned, we wouldn't be here at all, of course, if it wasn't for Al Primo. And I don't think this lunch would have made a lot of sense without Al Primo. Al, as you know, came up with the Eyewitness News format while he was at KYW in Philadelphia. He brought it to WABC New York. And it was the vision of this gentleman that made a success story, not just out of KABC and WABC, but of all the three other O&Os at that time that belonged to ABC. And then the format went on around the world. The most single successful format in the history of local television news in this country. There is a really great book. If you haven't read it, it is called Eyewitness Newsman. It was written, what, 2008? Yeah. It tells not only his story, the story of the concept, but also, more importantly, the lessons that he learned and the lessons that our up-and-coming folks in television news should be learning. An outstanding read, written with a lot of character. I love the part where you go back into the 50s and talk about technical disasters. We knew them all well, those of us of a certain age. And Al, I'm wondering if I can get you to come up. And while he's coming up, I want to tell you that copies of his books, Al has copies. He will autograph them for you. $10 a throw. What a bargain. But make it all cash. And I'm sure they'll go fast.
Well, thank you so much. It's really an honor to be here. I'm so touched that so many of you turned out, and it just brings back tremendous memories. I'm an accidental newsman like most of the people in this room. You wind up in television by accident. In my particular case, when I graduated high school in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in 1953, I went down to start looking for a job, and I started at the Point. That's where the Allegheny and Monongahela rivers meet to form the mighty Ohio River. And there were office buildings there, and I went through every single office building every single day for 2 weeks straight, 8 hours a day, going into the, applying for a job, any job. And then the last day at the last building, the Chamber of Commerce building, I went into the lobby and I see Copper's Company, 10th floor. So I went up to the 10th floor, made a left-hand turn, went in there and said, I'm here and I'd like to apply for a job. And they said, well, you know, have a seat. And it was a little bit crazy, I thought, for a plumbing company. And when I got the application, it said the Dumont Television Network. And, you know, we didn't even own a TV at our house, and I didn't realize that that's how the business worked. Well, as luck would have it, I got hired the next day as the mailboy. And it was a long way from WDTV to here. I worked there for about 12 years straight, and it was at a time when you could do pretty much anything. And so I, edited film, shot film, did reporting, did writing, and worked my way up over the 12 years to be assistant news director, but they would never make me the news director. And one day, the brass from New York comes in, and the general manager of the station says, Primo, you got to make the presentation because the current news director doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. So I did. I went up and talked about how we were going to start with a news bureau in Harrisburg and things like that. And at the end, this guy comes up to me and says, I'd like you to be my news director. And I said, where's that? He said, well, we're going to take over this station in Philadelphia, KYW. But you're going to have to go to Cleveland first for about 30 days until the license comes through. Well, that turned into 6 months. And when I get there, the first thing that happens is that the anchor man comes into my office and says, I'm leaving, I'm going back to Atlanta. Jim Axelrod was his name, by the way. I said, wait a minute, this is Westinghouse Broadcasting. You can't break a contract. He said, well, I never signed it. I said, oh, my God. By the way, your last speaker here, Art Schreiber, was the news director of the radio station, and we shared an office together. Well, labor relations were so tough at that particular station because of any number of things. They went through many, many news directors, and Art Schreiber was very instrumental in giving me the lay of the land. And, they would do little tricks like all the union members would disappear from the newsroom and the telephone would ring. And naturally, I'd go out to ring it, and he'd say, don't do that. I said, why? Because they'll file a grievance. And, of course, with Westinghouse Broadcasting Company, if you have a grievance against you, your career is pretty much limited because you get characterized as not being able to work with management. Anyhow, I started looking for an anchor person, and you know how difficult it might be to call somebody up and say, come to Cleveland, and, you're going to be here for 5 minutes. And I called everybody I knew. And one day, there was this tape that came in from a guy by the name of Tom Snyder from Los Angeles. So I put the tape in, and there he was in all his glory. And I tell you, he just knocked me out right from the beginning. So I called him up and I said, come here and do an audition. And he said, well, I don't have any money. You have to send me a ticket. So I sent him a ticket, and he came. And my manager and the people there put me through and put him through the most rigorous audition you ever. We took the truck out and put him on the street, and he just passed everyone. And so we got hired. Then Philadelphia came along, and I looked at the contract because everybody in the newsroom was a member of AFTRA. So in the middle of the contract, I read a line that says, any member of AFTRA can write, report, and appear on the air for no additional compensation. And it turns out that's the reason why reporters weren't on television in 1965. It was just the anchorman, the weatherman, the sportsman, and goodbye. And maybe one or two stations like, you had some people out here, individuals, and Gabe Pressman in New York, but no other people were on the air. So I called the lawyer and said, I'm going to put these people on the air. And he said, you have every right to do it. And so I did it. And it was like a miracle. All of a sudden, the station, which, by the way, was in pretty decent shape, not great shape, but John Facenda was the CBS anchor, and he was like the Jerry Dunphy of Philadelphia. But the minute we put this thing together, they were just in awe of their work and committed to it. And so I told Snyder, I said, look, these guys are standing up there with these, with these clipboards and reading their stories. And I would tell them, watch Snyder, and Snyder the good-hearted guy that he was, worked with these guys who were just, how did I get these? There were 12 people in the newsroom, and I took, the 3 ugliest guys and made them producers, and the 10 others became reporters. So I interviewed him, and, where did you go to college and what are you interested in? And, so I began a beat system, based on the traditions of journalism. And in 2 weeks' time, these guys were bringing back story after story that were, not earth-shattering, but original, that weren't there. And it was so effective that the newspapers, started wrapping the station because of it. At any rate, Philadelphia being Philadelphia, while we became the #1 station in town, and what I did was put together all the things I learned in that 12 years in Pittsburgh, struggling, as a writer and, camera person and an editor, put all of that together and came up with this whole eyewitness news business. But in Philadelphia, nobody notices because Philadelphia is a tryout town. You can do anything you want in Philadelphia and nobody notices. But one day I get a call from Dick Wiesmeyer, who's the general manager of Channel 7 in New York. So he invites me to come up there and talk to him about being the news department. So I went, being a good news person, I went a day ahead of time and looked at the show, and it was just a disaster. They had Roger Grimsby and the Noisemakers was the thing. And they had Howard Cosell and Rona Barrett and people like that. And it was really a disaster. So I said to him, you got to make major changes here. And he said, just do what you got to do. Just do what you got to do because my job's on the line. So I did, and now we had a budget. And the contract in New York was, if you hired a reporter at the $30,000 level, everything over $30,000 enables you to use them in any way you like without, these excessive talent fees. So now, instead of picking guys who were there, I was able to go out and find, weekend anchors, people who have some experience on the air, and put them all together and explain to them this whole concept of what we were trying to do, and is, don't ever come back here without a soundbite from a person who was affected by the story. Don't give me police chiefs and fire chiefs and so forth. And it was a real experience. One of the first things we did, I was just telling Julie here today, I'm driving in from Connecticut, and the traffic is terrible. And so I say to the desk, what's going on? He said, well, there's a policeman's funeral. A policeman was shot, and they're going to St. Patrick's. And I said, oh my God, see, we got a crew there. I said, oh, no, we've never interrupted the dignity of the funeral. I said, get everybody down there right now. I'll put 2 reporters there. And so we started doing things like that weren't earth-shattering, but were things that were just never done on television. And that really started to pay off in a really, really major way. So that's really what happened. And I think that the way it worked at the network at ABC was you start out there, and if you make it up to the network level and you screw up, you get bumped down to radio, ABC Radio, which had 250 affiliates. And if you screw that up, you wind up in local, which is where I was. So everybody in the room had failed somewhere along the line here. And so we brought them all together, and I had the first meeting. And here I was, 20-something guy to these, these veteran newsies. And so I said what we were going to do. And I said, everybody who wants to be part of this, it's going to be the greatest thing you can ever imagine. And I know it because I've done it. I know how to do it, and I'm going to teach you how to do it. And if you're willing to do it, we're going to be fine. If you're not, if you have any hesitation, come to my office and we'll get you another job. So nobody came. Well, maybe 1 or 2 people came. But the idea was to explain the concept of what we were trying to do. And how did that concept come alive? When ABC hired me, they put me up at the Sheraton Hotel, which is just about 4 blocks from the station. And every day I'd walk to work, and what do I see? You know, black people, white people, Jews, Italians. And what did I see on the air? These 3 white guys, the weather guy, the sports guy, and the anchor guy. And it was like the good Lord was whispering in my ear, you know, get people on the air that look like the people of the community that you're serving. And so we began bringing them in one by one, but I couldn't get anybody to come to work for us. I called, I called everybody. And I called over at CBS Gloria Rojas, who was a Spanish reporter, and I thought she'd be great. So she says, I can't come, you know, I represent my ethnic group, and people count on me. She said, but there's a guy by the name of Geraldo Rivera. He's a lawyer. Why don't you call him? So I was smart enough to say, well, have him call me, will you? So he did. He called me, and I brought him into the office. And, you know, as he was crossing the threshold of my office, you know, I knew this guy had it. So I said, I'd love to hire you. I know you're a lawyer, but you got to learn journalism. So you got to join and go. We'll pay for it to the Columbia University Minority Training Program. And he reluctantly agreed to do that. And every day was, you know, I'm ready, you know, put me in, let me go, let me go. So he turned out to be quite the person, and he's still working to this day. And one of the things that I have in my career is that, you know, my batting average in talent is like about 900. And that's really the key to what was the beginning of all the success. We were going to try to create a news family. You know, in New York, those people live in those concrete boxes in the sky, and they got nobody. And what we wanted to do was to create this news family so that people come home from work can turn on news and, you know, feel part of the community and really have someplace to look. And that's what happened. It just worked like magic. And when you capture the imagination of the people of New York, it spreads like wildfire. And ABC made me the vice president of news, and I came out here to Los Angeles and worked with the people who were running the place, and all of them were, you know, very top-rate, talented people. And we, you know, my job was really to make sure that they put the thing together as a family and made everybody feel part of the community. And they did that. And I used to say, Eyewitness News in New York was great. Eyewitness News in Los Angeles was Eyewitness News on speed. You know, it was so great here because you had the greater talent and so forth. That's about it. You know, I'm at the point in my life where I'm counting my blessings and counting my friends. A lot of my friends are here, and of course, we've all been blessed to be in the television business. Amen.
So the question I have is about the music from Cool Hand Luke. How did that come about?
Well, the first thing I did when I got to New York was to try to do a new opening because we were going to try to get on the air with a little bit of zing. So ABC, I don't know if it still has it, but has a music library and a music librarian. And so I took a director and we went over there all day listening to disc after disc after disc. And then I hear this theme from Cool Hand Luke, and it's the tar sequence, and it's about 10 seconds long. And I said, that's it, we got it. I said, but it's only 10 seconds long. And Marty Morris, the director, said, don't worry, I can loop that, and we did it. And the guy who wrote it likes to think he's more famous. Lalo Schifrin is more famous for Eyewitness News than he is for all his other work.
Don't forget the book, folks. It's on sale, $10. Thank you very much. The next thing I'm going to do is bring up Steve Skutsky. Everybody who ever worked at Channel 7 in the last 4 decades knows who Steve Skutsky is. Altogether, he spent 47 years with ABC, retired a year ago January, am I right? and he was for 45 years at KABC, instilling the eyewitness news format as producer and writer of The 11. He brought that show up to number 1. He was a longtime producer for George Fishbeck. He created this expression, film at 11, that we've always used for good or bad over the years. Steve Skutsky.
Okay. There I am in Fresno around 1969, 1970. And there's Bill Bonds, who was the anchor at KABC Eyewitness News when it first started. I had only been in Fresno a short time when that popped up on our video monitor because we had the ABC news feed out of Los Angeles, and they showed it every day at 5 p.m. And I thought, wow, I mean, that's really something. We had a news department of 9 people. And I thought, wow, that's a far-off dream to think I'd ever be working there. So a lot has happened since then, 50 years later, so let's get in our time machine and take a look back.
John Severino is my pleasure to bring up. Sure, he's controversial. He's been persuasive. He's been a legend. He came to KABC from Chicago in 1974, and he helped build Eyewitness News into a ratings powerhouse and continuous leader here in Southern California. He launched a gentleman on the road to stardom who is sitting right next to him, Regis Philbin. If you didn't know, Regis is in the house. He hired Regis to be the entertainment reporter on Eyewitness News, and then he, of course, was the host of AM Los Angeles. And later, as president of ABC Television, John Severino hired Regis again for the WABC TV morning show in New York. He returned to KABC, second round as general manager, in 1985 for 3 more years. And I personally thank Sev for bringing Regis and for inspiring this program today. John Severino.
So let's face it. People didn't really want to watch Eyewitness News alone. They wanted those editorials at the end of Eyewitness. So I had to deliver it. Well, I graduated from the University of Connecticut, and I was lucky enough to play football there. And because of football, I got hired with a TV station in Portland, Maine. So I worked at a TV station in Portland, Maine for 1 year, went to a radio station in Boston for 1 year, went to WABC TV New York for 1 year, went to National Sales Chicago for 1 year, National Sales New York for 1 year, sales manager Chicago for 1 year, general sales manager Detroit for 1 year, and now I'm 33 years old, and they make me president of WLS TV Chicago. In my mind, I was the most qualified, perfect guy for this job until I got into it. And I had no idea what the hell I got into. I mean, I knew sales, I knew ratings, I knew how to make ratings. I knew nothing about news, programming, promotion, and none of that. It was totally, for the first time in my life, I was in over my head, and I knew it. But thank God I had myself surrounded with enough people who helped me, cared for me, and my predecessor at Chicago was a guy named Dick O'Leary. And O'Leary put together the concept of Eyewitness News. He hired an old Irish guy who was with the CBS station by the name of Fahey Flynn. Fahey came over to Channel 7, and it took off. O'Leary got promoted. I took the benefit of the rating increase at WLS in Chicago, got credit for it, and they promoted me to KABC Los Angeles. When I got out here, KABC was the number 5 station in a 7-station market. we weren't even in the news business. We were doing a 15-minute local news early and a network news of 15 minutes. And I said, look, to make this thing work, we got to do something to get this newscast going. So we enlarged it right away to a half-an-hour news. And the anchor man that we had was a guy named John Schubeck. And the first week I was there, Schubeck left and went to NBC. And I said, how the heck did this happen? He's under contract. They didn't have any contracts for the people on the air. I changed that pretty quickly, let me tell you. So I called New York and I said, okay, I'm going to put this new anchor in place of Schubeck. They said, who's the new anchor? I said, her name is Christine Lunn. They said, you're going to put a woman in there? I said, yeah, because that's the best I got here. So we put Christine there and we stumbled along for a while. Well, from what I had learned in Chicago, if I could somehow get an older, maybe even Irish gentleman to come over and do our news, maybe that would work. So I started romancing a guy named Jerry Dunphy over at CBS. And when I say romancing, I mean romancing, because you had to go have cocktails with Jerry Dunphy. So what I would do is we'd go into the restaurant and I'd say to the bartender, you give him whatever he wants. I'm going to order vodka and soda. You just give me plain soda. Don't give me any vodka. So we talked and we finally got going. But he was under contract to CBS and I couldn't touch him. And I said, Jerry, the only way this is going to work is if you ever get release of your contract, and then we can make a deal. And one day, I get a phone call from Jerry Dunphy, and he says, they want to demote me here at Channel 2. They've got a new young guy they're bringing over. Can we make a deal there with you? And I said, if you get a release from that contract, I can make a deal with you. So the next day, I was at a tennis match, and I was playing against the general manager of CBS. And he said, are you interested in hiring Dunphy? I said, absolutely not. We have no interest in him. He's old, he's over the hill. He's not going to do anything. So the next day we announced that we hired Dunphy. So he called me up and he said, I thought you weren't interested. I said, I lied. Well, that was the beginning of something beautiful because we had Jerry and Christine Lunn, and then we owned the personalities in the market. We didn't have an entertainment reporter at the time. CBS did, so we emulated CBS, and we hired this guy named Regis Philbin to do what David Sheehan was doing over at CBS. And that worked out pretty darn well. And, and then we kept hiring more and more of the local personalities. We finally ended up with a team of Jerry Dunphy, Paul Moyer. Eventually, we had Tom Snyder over there. We had Ann Martin, Tawny Little, Christine Lunn, Dr. George. We had Bruce Hershenson, John Tunney doing commentary. We had Elmer Dills doing food. We had all the personalities in the market pretty well locked up with us. Harold Green was there, and he anchored one of them. It was perfect. Well, we decided that we had to do something because some people were accusing us of being very liberal in our news presentations, and others considered us being very conservative. There was a thing with the police department that were a problem, and the problem was that there were shootings from the police department of unarmed citizens. And we made a big deal of this. We got one of the cops to come on the air, put him in a mask, and he did a report. We won a Peabody Award for that, and that gave us more and more credibility, which is something that we were somewhat lacking in. And that started to develop. Then there was a guy by the name of Howard Jarvis, and what was happening was that property taxes were continuing to increase here in Los Angeles, and it was driving the older seniors, some of which I even see here, it was driving some of the older seniors out of the ability to maintain their houses because their taxes were going up so much. And Howard came up with this idea called Prop 13, where he'd freeze the property taxes on the house at 1978 levels, and they could only increase 1% a year after that. Well, we thought this would be a good counterpoint to put on the air, so we decided that we'd have an interview every night with a pro Prop 13 and an anti-Prop 13 person. Well, we started off the first night with Howard Jarvis, and we got someone against Howard. And Howard did well, this other guy did okay. Well, we couldn't find anybody else other than Howard Jarvis that wanted to do the pro Prop 13, and we'd get somebody different every night. What wasn't our intention, but it gave the impression to the viewing audience that Howard had won the debate the night before and was therefore back again the next day. So I get a phone call from a guy by the name of Jerry Brown, who happened to be the governor then, and his chief of staff, and they wanted to come down and have a conversation with me. So they came down and they said, look, we've got Prop 13 beat throughout the rest of the state, but here in Los Angeles, with what you're doing on Channel 7, Prop 13's in trouble, so we'd like you to stop doing it. And I said, well, I got bad news for you. We're going to simulcast this at our own station in San Francisco, the same thing, and I'm making it available to any ABC affiliates or NBC affiliates or CBS affiliates throughout the state that want to carry it, and they did. And to this day, Jerry Brown will tell you that one of the major factors in the fact that Proposition 13 was approved and still is in existence today is because we did it at what we did at Channel 7. So that was pretty good, and it all worked out pretty well. Eyewitness News, I'll try to make this short because there's some more people coming up with. I've got to tell you a funny story. After I left ABC, we started this thing called Prime Ticket, which was kind of fun to do as sports over with Jerry Buss and a guy named Bill Daniels. And then I got sent to, I didn't get sent, I went, gladly so, to Europe as president of a thing called Central European Media Enterprises. And we took TV stations in the former communist countries and converted those to commercial stations. So we had stations in Prague and in East Berlin and in Romania, Slovenia, Slovakia, and we kind of used in some of them the Eyewitness News format. Thank you, Mr. Primo. And we tried to use this format at our station in Prague. The problem was that the station that we took over was a military station. We had a 5% share of audience. The government station had a 95% share of audience. So it was a tough, and we didn't have any budget to do the promotion for our Eyewitness News team. So I figured we've got to do something on air because that's the only vehicle we've got to promote. We've got to do something on air to promote the new newscast that we're going to be putting forth. So I said, well, what can we do? There was a film syndicator around by the name of Sandy Frank. And Sandy had a bunch of products that he was syndicating, and he was attempting to get them syndicated in Europe. And so I made a deal with Sandy for this one particular show. And we put the show on the air without a lot of fanfare. We just put it on with the hope that this would work. In 3 weeks, we had a 90% share of audience. The government station was a 5% share. Why it happened, I don't know. We had this show. It was a pretty good show. It was called Baywatch, and it worked. Who knows why? Anyway, it's been a blast. Steve, thank you. It's been great to see what you've done. The work is just fantastic. Appreciate it. Regis Philbin and I go back a long way. And Regis has written a couple of books, and in one of those books, he was rotten enough to write a whole chapter about me. Some of which sounded okay, some of which was fun. And I'm sure he's going to mention the way he and I negotiated contracts, because he always brings that up. Reed, you going to say a few words?
I don't remember that. Stay right where you are. When did we have this? What you're talking about?
Oh, about 100 years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, it really was. Boy, oh boy, I just can't get over it. Who are you?
I'm your godfather.
Oh, God, I started in 1955, and I had to leave 8 years ago. And all these things that have happened to me over the years, but I always remember John Severino. I loved him from the beginning. I used to go to your place, and we would sit there and watch the thing, because I was coming on at 6 o'clock. And we had a wonderful time, I thought, didn't you?
Absolutely.
It was just great.
Well, Regis didn't just do the 6 o'clock. In order to get on the air, he was co-hosting the AM Los Angeles show.
Yeah.
So he had to be there at 6:37 a.m. And then he would do the 5 o'clock news, the 6 o'clock news, and of course the 11 o'clock news. I mean, what the hell? Might as well get as much out of him as I could for the amount of money we were paying
And he
him.
did, too, boy. That was him at his best. Anyway, I loved it. I loved coming here today and seeing everybody, and especially getting your whole life stories. Yeah. Because I was a part of it, and I'll never forget it.
Okay, Regis, we're not through with you. Okay, there you are on AM Los Angeles with Sarah Purcell. And I wanted to show this picture that was given to us by Martin Orozco because it also shows our longtime Inland Empire reporter, Bob Banfield. Not too many people know that he was a co-host on Regis's AM show for a couple of years. Regis, when you first showed up, you were on my 11 o'clock news. That was 1974. And it was such a wonderful experience working with you. I don't know if you recall, you would occasionally call me up at home in the morning and get my take on what stories you were to cover for the 11 o'clock news. And you were such a professional, and you occasionally would joke about me on the air, actually, and it was all in great fun.
Say that to him?
What's that?
Did you ever tell him that?
I haven't told too many people that story at all. But it was really great working with you. Now I want to say a word about Dr. George. I was his producer of most of his news specials for about 10 years, including his visits to Portugal, which is was truly an inspiring experience. He was one of the major reasons for the success of Eyewitness News, one of the most popular on-air personalities in the history of LA local news, an amazing communicator and a wonderful humanitarian who truly loved people.
Coming up in part 2 of our February 2nd, 2019 News Geezers Lunch, Harold Green, Terry Crowfoot, Gene Gleason, and Pete Noyes as we continue to salute the 50th anniversary of Eyewitness News at KABC TV, Los Angeles.